Welcome to Green and Gold FC. We are joined by Ahmed, our original host, and David from Football 360, new media company for football in Australia. How are you going, Ahmed?
Pretty good yourself?
Not too bad. Just so much football to catch up with now that we have 8 championship games each weekend, Aussies abroad, Matilda's Socceroos, and of course 6 A-League matches every week. How are you going, David?
Terrific. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. So today we're going to have a bit more of a casual format where I believe you're going to be interviewing us as much as we interviewing you. But I want to hear a little bit about your background. What caused Football 360 and what is your vision for it?
Oh, big question to start with. Oh, where should we start with that question? Because that's been a journey for us for the last my co-founder and I, Anthony Pinchot and I, for the best part of 2025. Look, I don't know what the audience knows about my past, but the short story of that is I've been involved in this caper for the best part of 20 years. Started in the industry in 2007, and I've been blessed to have edited the likes of Fox Football, Optus Sport, when those outlets were right into their football and had the broadcast rights for the best assets in the country, and then spent some time at the A-League too, where I was director of content. And I have a deep love for the game. It's been a big part of my life. Professionally, it's been an intoxicating part of my life, one that I really am grateful that I've been able to combine something I really enjoy with something that I believe in deeply, and that's great storytelling, the coverage of football, the importance of football to our society, but also the potential it has here in Australia, which I know so many of us sort of chase. But in those jobs, I did see the best of it, and I still believe there's something really, really exciting and enticing there to pursue. So look, that's been my very short story, been my professional life, and I don't remember a life without football, playing it as a kid, or being around it, being around family or friends, or as I've got older, just being a key fabric of what I do. 360 came about. I found myself in a position where I was no longer working in the game or in the industry through all different circumstances, but also as a fan sat back and said, look, this isn't good enough, and I want to do something about it rather than complain about it. And with the level that I was at in my career, and the connections that I had and the knowledge that I had over that time, I thought if anyone's going to have a crack at trying to shake up the way football is done and give it the respect it deserves, that if I could get the right business situation going, that I could. This was the time to do that. So Football 360 evolved in that time. I'm really excited about it. We're barely, we're still in nappies. We haven't even we're in our third full week at the moment. And we can talk about however much of what I just said, in more detail, but I think that's the most general one-on-one I can give you. And our vision, our vision is to be the destination for football fans in the country, and eventually a one-stop shop for fans of whichever part of the game is your passion.
The story you're telling, David, it's quite an interesting one because when we were chatting before, I mentioned my journalism background. I think when we came on, I was really interested to hear the journey you've traveled on, because I have a very different journey within football journalism within Australia. So looking at Football 360, I think I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like in the past there's always been different avenues, like you say, Fox Sports, Optus Sport, the Raw, the World Game website, all these different avenues. There was Inside Sport 442, where they propped football as their main focus. But then for whatever reason has always kind of died down, or the investments, particularly with Fox Sport, perhaps went to other sports as well. With the creation of Football 360, what is the key goal that you envisioning, and where you see Football 360 taking football coverage in Australia?
That's a fantastic question. And a key part of what our journey was this year was articulating a lot of this, because often when you spoke to people, and we talked to investors, we talked to people in the business world, they said, what do you mean football coverage has died in the country? What do you mean football coverage has disappeared? When you speak to people in the UK, socially, I go, it's very hard to explain this to you, but there's very little coverage of football in Australia. So I think it wasn't always the case. I go back 10 years and, when I was editor of Fox Sports, I had, the full army of News Corp journalists in my stable, one in each state. I had an entire team of Fox Sports pundits. I had an entire team of Fox Sports talent. I had a team of digital journalists, and I had Garby over in the UK. And that was just one outlet within the ecosystem. You had the World Game, as you mentioned, which was the genuine custodian for football. And you had Fairfax covering it, with the late Mike Cockrell and Michael Lynch. There was a proper football news cycle, proper discourse, proper dialogue, great box office around it. It was fantastic. Look, separate discussion. We can talk about it if not. I've got whatever reason the industry got to the point that it is. It is where it is now. Football coverage in Australia is not acceptable for the level of interest there is in the sport, for the passion there is in the sport, for the amount of participants there are in the sport. It doesn't make sense. And I think there's a vacuum in thought leadership or belief in the game when a generation probably above me, that the moment the tide blows a different way, football becomes collateral damage. They're not interested in it. Those three places that I've talked about, our success came when there was pretty much the link was either broadcast rights or a leader who shared my values, and we were unleashed and allowed to do things for the game. Then when the wind blows another direction, I mean, look, Optus Sport doesn't exist anymore. I mean, that's how crazy the industry is. So I think football had a number of issues that I looked at and said, these are all married up at once. You have no custodian. So whether it's the World Game, or if you think about all the other sports have it, NRL.com.au, AFL.com.au, cricket.com.au, rugby.com.au, every sport has a custodian of sorts, whether it's owned or external. Mainstream coverage has just gone out the river. And even if you say, around the Socceroos and Matildas big games, there's okay coverage. They cover the what, right? There's no why, how, or 365-day a year news cycle. There just simply isn't. The broadcaster, I'll say this politely, compare what you get out of the football broadcaster to Fox Footy, Fox League, NRL on 9, 7 cricket. Put it that way. Massive opportunity there. And then there's the fragmentation of football. There are so many places to keep up with football from a streaming perspective, both from expense and convenience. It's difficult to do. And I think ultimately, if I'm looking from the game's perspective, it's probably the local game that's often the collateral damage of those, economic decisions. From a consumption point of view also, but I think from an opportunity for an outlet like ours, people are actually kind of interested in it still. It's just they're just exhausted by it. And you know what life's like. You move on, you just don't follow it. To your question, Ahmed, bringing that all back, where football hasn't gone is football's not producing or playing in best practice in the digital age, in an age of social first content. We're in the dark ages. So what I want Football360 to do is to try and simultaneously be aware of those challenges and drive into what I said was a market gap, and over the year I changed it into a market crater, to fill that void by serving it with digital and social best practice in a methodology, which is to reach the audiences, talk with the audiences, engage with audiences, listen and respond to data about what the audiences want. Best practice identifying the way video is cut, the way video is distributed, all of those things. Football's not there. And I think that's inevitably, if I'm looking at it from a game's point of view, that's a ceiling on the game, as much potential as the game has. But ultimately, my focus has to be for the benefit of this business that I've started. But I make no secret of the fact there's easier ways to make a quid. So clearly, my end game for all of this is, if my business is successful, I hope that the sport benefits from it. So that's probably the romantic answer to your question, Ahmed, is that's the role I want to see it play. I see myself as being in the center of the Football360, being the center of the sort of the news cycle, the football digital content news ecosystem, bipartisan. So, I make no apologies for the fact that I don't see any enemies in this. You'll see straight away that I've got, SBS commentators' notes on the site. We've got links to Be in Sport. We'll promote what time a game is on Paramount Plus. We've had pundits from Paramount Plus on our coverage. We've had commentators from SBS on our bylines. We've had talent on Stan who are going to be part of our portfolio. I want to lift the standard of the industry. And in conclusion as well, one thing the game does have going for it is these great communities like yourself, a really burgeoning social class of, Suited and Booted, SC Hellos, JK Football, some terrific youngsters doing things off their own bat. Every game has them and all the layers I said are missing. So it's critical we have that element of a digital hub for the game to drive discourse, to tell stories, but also to actually have a safe space for fans, but also to keep the game accountable. And at the same time, all the youngsters that are doing stuff at the end of the day, I mean, in the creator economy, they might make money doing it solo, and good luck to them and God bless them if they can. But otherwise, there's no thought leadership or anything to sort of support that. And that's a role I see us playing, and we're starting to play already, despite being honestly still in nappies.
So you mentioned the bipartisan element of your vision. And one thing about football in Australia is we may be a big community, but we're much more divided than other codes. And we haven't really had an all of football media outlet since the World Game died. So when the World Game Forum died, you had 442, you had the World Game, and you had, of course, A-League Reddit. And essentially you had these ideological silos. And we tried, and we're trying with Green and Gold to try and be a place where if you're someone who hates the A-League or loves the A-League or hates your traditional clubs or loves them or doesn't get into the ideological, that basically everyone can be there. But there are big divides in the game. How do you manage, what's your vision for managing those divides in the game and covering all of football?
It's a really good question. And look, I come from a position of, and whether this is naive or half glass full, look, it's got me to where it's got me in my career and my life. So I'm not going to change that. I don't, not that I know of, have many enemies. I don't look to go pick fights. People who are enemies with each other seem to be friends with me. I believe in the power and the talent and the influence of this sport. I think we've sort of struck a balance at the start that shows who we want to be. You come to our Splash, and of course, there's physical limitations to what we can do, particularly being a startup. But to the best of our abilities, you come to our platform on a particular day, you can read something about the championship, you can read something about the A-League, you can read something about either the Matildas or, we have a partnership with the women's game. So, a really specific genre of content there. Socceroos, Aussies abroad, human interest, opinion, like, we see it as a pyramid. You can come into our platform and enter at your level on the pyramid. And if you're like us, who love all sorts of football, you'll float between the pyramids. And maybe if you think you don't like the elements, you might be surprised and delighted what happens when you walk up and down the stairs. We will treat every story and every topic on its merits, and we'll look at it objectively, and we'll be fair. And look, I know how the temperature out there in the diehard element of the football community, but I also think we've also got to rise above that and actually see the power of the sport when it is united and when people look at things, call a spade and are honest and transparent with each other. The other thing with that is that's one element of the sport which has probably held itself back. There's two things there. Is you're right about there's not been an all of football platform, but I think that's also always come down to it being rights driven. So, for example, when Stan picked up the Premier League recently, all of our business plan had Optus in it. Like, we were prepared to go to market. We thought there was still an opportunity while Optus was still around. Stan's editorial remit is to promote its assets. It is not there to look more broadly at the game. It is there as, all of a sudden they've got the rights and suddenly Premier League content's in the newspaper. That's not newsworthiness. That's promoting your assets. Great for football to have that exposure. Fantastic. Don't get me wrong. And I enjoyed reading that, but let's be honest. Like, that's the reality of it. And again, I see an opportunity to go, hang on, why is no one harnessing all these magical assets that are sitting here? And have their own engagement, their own communities, and look to build on top of that. And the other element is that divisiveness is quintessential Australian football. There's an element, in my first piece I wrote, yes, I agree, it's mad to be diving into this willingly. But I also move around, and my friends, my family, are not actually as diehard as I am. on this. So I see a bit of what the general sports fan or the general Australian does view, and they don't read into it as deeply or divisively or as antagonistically or as cynically as some of the communities that we do traverse to. So there's a tremendous growth opportunity in telling good stories and making it travel as far and wide as possible to grow the appetite and interest in the game. So at the end of the day, that's also, as much as you want to respect, deliver, talk with, the absolute core and diehards of the game, the other thing is we also don't want, regressive attitudes or divisiveness or politics to hold us back in reaching all the people who are actually really interested in this stuff. They've just never been served it because it's not been done properly.
Yeah, so good. I was going to jump in because a lot of what you said is quite interesting, and it kind of made me think about some interactions I had with other football media back in between 2000 and was it 2008 onwards, roughly. Um, but I'm curious your thoughts on like what you think around like media like Stan Sports or Channel 9, for example. They're obviously the big players in the game with regards to media. And I'm not sure if you recall watching a video from Jackie Falgate. It was back in August, I think, from 3AW, where she was talking about how football in Australia has often been presented and portrayed. And perhaps we need to look at ourselves. She was like talking to the media, like we as media need to be introspective and go, are we being fair to football? But then you also said Stan Sport, like their interest is their masthead Fairfax, or the Nine Entertainment as they're now called. How much do you think they have the money and the power to do it, but how much do you think they can control that narrative around how big football should get? And for forums like Green and Gold or for your website like Football360, how much of that do you see as an uphill battle to overcoming?
No, I don't see it as a battle at all. I see that as part of the reason why we came to be is football needs to stop pandering to the audience that is not interested in it or is running against the tide, running up Mount Everest. If football was treated on a newsworthy basis, on a level of and treated with the same curiosity or the same given the same opportunity as other sports, it would have happened over the last few years. Like it is whether it's through it can come down to the personality of leadership and come down to all sorts of different things. That's gone. So football needs to stop worrying about that and take control of its own destiny. And you have the opportunity to do that in 2025 in a creator economy. Like the biggest influencer in Australian sport this year, it is AFL based, the Dan Does Footy account, that is going to change the way sport is consumed in Australia. You've just seen in the UK, Bundesliga rights have gone to content creators, gone to YouTube. There is an opportunity for sports to take control of their own destiny and to not worry about mainstream anymore. So frankly, the more that mainstream continues to ignore football, that's not a battle for us. That's the opportunity, because there's two things there. One, we're the safe space where fans know they're going to get coverage. So my argument, one of our mottos is, once the bandwagon's picked up and they moved on, the Matildas matchday +1, we'll still be there for matchday +3, 4, 5, 6, and it'll bump into the next game. So massive opportunity for us there. When the mainstream media is chasing, the one story about the Matildas, all about Sam Kerr in this instance, we're here to go, a couple of layers below that. So there's a bit of nuance and light and shade to the coverage, but also, not unlike the Felgate clip, where football is not getting a fair go, we're also there to stand up for it and to prosecute the case more evenly. So there's a couple of answers to your question. One, is it an issue for us? No, it's an opportunity. It's why we're here to be. But if I was in the game, and I have said this to people in the game, that worrying about what's in the newspaper is a regressive strategy, right? That's done. It's behind a paywall. They don't have your interests. They'll, as soon as knife you as they will fulfill the obligation of what you've paid them to do. The game's got to stop worrying about that, because for 10 years now, where have we got to? So don't get me wrong. If was seeing live free-to-air Premier League on Channel 9 fantastic to have people that haven't spoken to me about the Premier League come up and say, "Oh, did you see what happened?" I mean, that's great. It's fantastic. It's never going to last because it was just a Trojan horse to get people to subscribe to Stan. But it's fantastic that there is the opportunity, if they want to do it, that a organisation with a very big reach can discuss football. But we'll see if they do. Time will tell there. They've got a lot of sports, in their suite.
It's interesting, this whole discussion about trying to attract the approval of mainstream media, and we just have never been able to do that. And it feels like, from my perspective, that we have really self-sabotage a lot trying to seek the approval of the mainstream, right? We hid all associations with migrant communities at the start of, towards the end of the NSL and the start of the A-League, because we feared being seen as foreign. And then once the A-League started, we started attacking active supporter, most passionate supporters, because we feared how that was viewed. And so that is essentially seems to be what killed the crowds in the A-League. And so that's deeply needed. But I'm curious, if you forgive the two questions, I want to ask two questions.
Double barrel.
Double barrel question. How are you going to cover it next time there's, if you see a bunch of flags at migrant flags at a South Melbourne game, or if you see a bunch of active supports getting really, really excited and the whole media's basically painting them as terrorists, all the things. And B, how are you going to essentially hold the powers that be within the football community to not focus on what people outside the football community care about us so much?
Okay, a couple of questions there to unpack. The first one being, is the pandering to the mainstream? I think, just to go back 10 years, I think it was like, you go back to the peak that I spoke about, and that was a great time. The coverage of the game was proper. So, like, I wouldn't say sort of pandering, but that was, the balance there was spot on. I do believe we got to where we got to amidst, I've sort of hinted at maybe, some cynicism within the leadership of the media, broadcast rights, that kind of thing, personality, but ultimately there was self-sabotage. There's no question about that. And I think so much of that came down to the constitutional crisis, the leadership issues that the game had. It led to obviously the splintering with the APL. And then at that time, this wasn't so much a pandering to mainstream. This was actually, there was the story, of course, with News Corp, with the active support and all that. Absolutely, that was part of it. But also just a complacency, a resting on laurels, and then the politics coming back into the game at a really, really top level. The only oxygen football got from a coverage point of view at that point was about the politics. Fans don't want to, they don't want to know about politics, they're not interested in politics, and men in suits don't sell tickets to games. So in that period, when the eye was taken off fan engagement, when the eye was taken off fan first, when the eye was taken away from reverse stakeholder management, the game worrying about the fan, the game worrying about the player, that's when things started to fall off the cliff. And we've been paying a price for that ever since. So that's kind of how I think we got to this point. So yes, there was the pandering to the mainstream. There was always trying to be, I mean, I can't go back and answer the full War and Peace. That's a 3-hour seminar. And you need many more people besides me to get stuck into that. But yeah, I've always been strong on, we need to be proud of our territory. We need to be proud of who we are. We need to own what we've got. We need to embrace the best of what this sport offers. And that will be our turbocharge into the future. If we're worrying about doing the right thing to attract the rugby league fan or attract an AFL fan, it's the wrong strategy. What have we got as a game here in Australia? And a game here in Australia, that's a really key part of it too. This is football in Australia. It is different. Even the consumption of stuff that you love, Ahmed, you watch it differently to a fan in the UK. So it's being a football fan in Australia, whether you're a fan of the grassroots or a fan of Manchester United, it's a very different beast. So we have to respect that what goes into that. To answer your question about how we'll cover it, there's going to be a test. There's no question. But like I told all the stakeholders when I met them over the 6 months to go, we're doing this. Like I've had a big stakeholder pathway to get to this point, because we wanted to be a legitimate part of the ecosystem from the moment we start. We want to contribute to the game and make meaningful contributions to the game and build an audience quickly. objective, fair, transparent, honest, even, right of reply, these types of things. I hope we get it right more often than not. Try to understand what the issue is about. We're not here for tabloid, or we're not tabloid. We're not sensational. If it means we take our time to get the story right, we'll do that too. Now, can I hold them to account for trying to pander to the mainstream? I mean, that'll be part of our commentary but it's also part of what we've got to do is we've got to continue to, and that's why we've gone in with columnists as well that hold gravitas and great insight, is because part of the conversation. My favorite part of covering the sport is the actual sport, the storytelling, the action, the goals, the drama, the heroes, the villains. That's my favorite. But I'm under no illusion that in this platform that we've built, there'll be times when we have to do the right thing for the people like yourselves, like myself, like as a fan, and actually, dig into issues that need to be dug into. Fingers crossed. That's not as often as it tends to throw up, but I'm aware it will inevitably happen.
So what I'm hearing there is that Football 360 isn't going to be afraid to hit hard when it needs to hit hard. It doesn't matter who the name is or who the person is, but if it's for the benefit of Football 360, we'll basically call them out, or we'll talk about that. Is that? I mean, I'm probably using a bit harsher tones by saying call them out, but essentially, is that's something Football 360 is happy.
For the benefit of the game is the key thing you say there. There's no agenda. My biggest agenda is to make my business, and as I said to you, the romantic reason for it. But at the end of the day, this business needs to be sustainable. So we need to be doing content that our audience is interested in. But part of our mission is to be for the benefit of the game, for the benefit of the game. So a really good example is in our first 2 weeks. Like, I love the A-League, right? I gave up a seat on the couch at Optus Sport to go work for the A-League. Like, I wanted to be part of the game here. And our first 2 weeks, we previewed the season. At the same time, we've written multiple pieces talking about the fact of the game is at a tipping point. It's at a pivotal moment in time. There needs to be oxygen given to the idea that the way the A-League is being run at the moment is not good enough. So acceptable to have clubs on life support. And as we mature and build our reputation and get our feet under the desk, which they're not even yet, you'll be able to take some time to even dive into that into a more considered way. But it's always for the better of the game. It's not going to be because I want to have a crack at the A-League because it's, fishing season. It's because, are we happy with how the A-League is now? No. Do we think there's improvements around it? Of course. So I think when we launched, we had a column from Bo Bush from the PFA talking about that, the game's got to look into the mirror. Don't quote me on this. It's but along the lines of, 20 years in, where are we? I spoke to Scott Jamieson, Melbourne City assistant coach, last week off the back of their ACL game, and that turned from a discussion of how good was it that you were successful with the kids to, by the way, like, we've got to be really careful we don't go the other way and, the APL rest on their laurels and think how good is it having all these kids. It's not really acceptable for the top league in the country. You need to have that balance, and we're going to get further and further away from competitive in Asia if we're like that. I believe that oxygen isn't being given to those discussion points right now. So that's where we'll go in there with nuance, with good people, with good ideas, with the right intentions at heart, who have lived experiences. Scott walked off the dugout on the Tuesday night and spoke to us on the Wednesday. That he's right in the hot seat of that. And that, I think that's a really good example of that. The A-League Women's launch is coming up. We'll have for you the season previews. We'll have beautiful human interest stories. We'll also discuss the fact that the A-League Women is not on the level of where the other leagues are, where it might have been on par with 5-10 years ago. That has to be said. And what I want to do is to be able to go to solutions mode at some point. But, you do have to start somewhere and build out that, that genre and that medium of content. So, it's certainly not my favorite part. I love the sport as opposed to anything, but I'm very aware of the responsibility a platform like this needs to take on.
So I'm curious, given our own experience with 442, about the whole project of trying to make money off football media in Australia. Before 442, there's a lot of grassroots. You had Studs Up, was the last magazine that I remember. There's all these fanzine, and there's like a live ecosystem of online blogs and printed out magazines and stuff, all grassroots, all passion. It felt like when that football revolution came in 2005, we had 442. They were a for-profit, very, very glossy magazine. Came in. A lot of that grassroots kind of seemed to shrink away, and eventually 442 left because they couldn't make money and couldn't make money in football in Australia. And so we end up with a situation where we didn't have the corporate coverage, and we didn't have the grassroots, and that had to be rebuilt. How can grassroots work together with for-profit outfits like yourself?
It's a really good question, and without giving away our commercial model, because it's obviously something we worked before we dived into it. You know, the romantic in us had to give way to the fathers of children who need to make sure this business stands up. And you know what? At the end of the day, there's two things that are contingent on this. The first thing is we have to build audience. So before we even get into the commercial model, we can't do anything if our thesis doesn't hold up, which is there's a massive audience, a massive appetite here, both in terms of the first thing being the underserved core audience will lap this up. And our initial figures is that we're still in nappies and we're still already been read, you know, we've hit six figures of traffic already, which I was not expecting. So that is a great delight. You know, we've had 3 million eyeballs on our social content in 2 weeks. Like there's an audience ready there to go. We've got to serve that audience. We've got to respect that audience. But the second part is obviously we've got to go into growth areas. If our thesis is wrong, there's no commercial model. So we need to make sure that we get the audience right. And then the areas that we want to explore that we feel like are slightly more creative and entrepreneurial than relying on the traditional bedrock of football only and media only. So not football only, of course it'd be football only, but as in media only, would have been that's a slightly dangerous game. So we have a whole heap of strategies to go down that line, but there's also no doubt that I think in time content will only be part of our mix, because I think that's going to be a shop window to other things that we can do.
That then, how much of it is going to be, like I've seen there's a global page on your website. Is the focus then going to purely be Australian first, or is it more about, no, we want to bring football as a whole, so we want to bring that global game knowledge and interest to the Australian public or the Australian footballing public?
Oh, another good question. I'm surprised that's actually it's taken us half an hour to go. That's only the first question I get, actually. I'm been really deliberate with our start. The start has been talking directly to the Australian football community, but I've got no doubt that, you know, part of the power of football that I feel like, again, this is back to your point earlier about we've got to be proud of who we are, stand tall in who we are. Don't worry about what the other codes are thinking, and also don't be ashamed to say we are part of this global behemoth. We're part of this global sensation, and the A-League is a part of that. The Championship is a part of that. The transfer players overseas are part of that. That's nothing to be ashamed of. We've got to find the sweet spot of how we communicate that and embrace that, and go, you know what, you might love this goal from Bayswater City on Sunday afternoon, but I know you're only looking at the goal. You're more interested in why Liverpool are cooked. Right? We've got to embrace that. That's a challenge. That's we're going to evolve into that mix. That's not easy to do straight away. But for me, the idea is make it easier and more enjoyable to be a football fan in Australia. Now, if you're telling me over the weekend you're able to consume all those championship games you read all at the top, the A-League, El Clasico, Liverpool, Manchester, you can't. You actually can't. So how do we siphon that into a place where, you know, you beauty, on the way to work on Monday morning, I got everything I need to know. And we've already started that to a certain extent. There's a fantastic newsletter my co-founder is putting out every morning, which when I get it, I'm like, well, that's good. I don't have to do anything today. I know everything now. You know, it's started to sort of symbolize where we want to get to in a fuller way. And we also have incredible insight sitting on our doorstep that has been untapped from legends that have played in all of those leagues, who, because of the shrinking media landscape, never get the chance to tell those stories or express those ideas. So yeah, I do believe, I mean, that going down that line lifts our ceiling, but certainly it's part of trying to just make it a one-stop shop for the Australian fan. If you are an absolute fanatic, we're not going to be better than The Athletic. We're not going to be better than, we're not going to have more than BBC. But all we'll have is we'll deliver it in Australian tonality, in Australian time zone. And for those who want that, I think there would be people will be surprised by that appetite. That's what we're going to be working towards. But it'll always be a mix. It'll always be a mix. Sorry, our motto is, we're through this, and this is in our About Us section. If the biggest story of the day is from NPL South Australia, that'll be the biggest story of the day. If the biggest story of the day is El Clasico, it'll be El Clasico. And the sun will come up the next day and we'll go again. I will throw one back at you. Yeah, no, I will, because actually it was quite a funny experience watching, and I'm glad I only discovered it after I plotted out our go-to-market. But I sort of watched your, what was it when your heart rate monitor? I watched the heart rate monitor of your interest into what this thing was on your forums, and it sort of started like, what the hell is this? Oh no, this is going to be another keep-up. What is this? I was like, oh, who's this guy? Well, this could be okay. Oh, it actually is okay. And then here we are. Talk me through sort of the other side of the fence of being a fan in the game, slogging it out for a labour of love, which you guys do, which is so admirable, respect. And then seeing something like this comes along, you don't know who it is at that point as well. Just your impressions to all that. And I guess my reading of the room, does that represent sort of your read of the room as well?
Yeah, so I can go first, and then I can say. So my perspective is, I think as a forum, what we want is to just live with the fact that there's divides in the game and let people have that out and let people enjoy all parts of the game, as well as not censoring people if people have like a passionate view, which is either pro one view of promotion, relegation, or anti, whatever. We let them have that. We're not going to lock threads or anything. And so we just accept that we have a divided game and try and have a community in that space. And we have this experience where corporate media is always ideological when it comes to football. So we think when we saw you guys for the first time, all my message channels, private message channels, which reflect on the forum, was, what's their ideology? That's basically, is this going to be, they say they're disrupting media, but is it going to just be A-League? Which I am an Brisbane Roar fan, so okay, fine, more stuff for me to read, but it's not good for the game as a whole. And so to be honest, I was quite skeptical, but then I felt, okay, this is actually does appeal to be all the game coverage. So similar to the forum, I don't know what my comments were. If you had a look at what my comments were, I can look at it back. If I did say anything too insulting, I tend to be pretty low back. But yeah, so I think I went over that journey too, because that for the last 20 years, everything has a partisan edge in Australian football. And if you want to represent all the game as a whole, I understand it's hard, but we haven't had a corporate side attempt to do that. So that's essentially why we run the pod, because we are interested in that.
Yeah, I think my interest would be slightly different to yours, because I've got a bit more engagement with football from a journalism perspective in the past, and as a football coach, and actually the school that I work at, we have a football academy as well at our school. Nice. So and I've definitely seen different sides of things. I've been in the media box with a bunch of other journalists in the past and seen how they've interacted and stuff like that. So I love football. I've always loved football. I'll always love football. I'm that person who's just sleep in the lounge room on a Saturday night watching just with the TV on, and wake up at random times and there's a game on. We continue watching. So yeah, I've always loved football, but I think my engagement with football is slightly different to the average fan, because I've had those interactions with media, and I've had the interactions with members in Football Australia, and working in the UK as well was a totally different environment. So seeing how things ran at Carrington or Manchester United, and with their media departments and stuff like that, was very different, very interesting. I guess when I first heard of Football360, there was a part of me which was like, is this going to be similar to what I've seen before? Is it just another reiteration? Anyone on the forum will know that I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with certain members of Football Australia, footballing media. And I think often seeing the same faces. It was like, oh, the same. We just recycle the same faces, the same voices. We need to grow. The game is, like you said, there's times when we need to acknowledge that the A-League isn't doing well, and we need to accept and listen to those voices. If we keep listening to the same voices, the game kind of slows down a bit, doesn't really, kind of stagnates. So for me, it was like, yeah, I'm interested to see what they do. I'm interested to see what they present, and if they the type of organization that's going to present football for what its beauty and what it stands for, perfect. And if they're willing to challenge and take the task when things aren't working, amazing. Because you're mentioning earlier about like how you want to like reach out to those fans and make them accept, like, be comfortable and happy with football. I think something along the lines of like, we should embrace football and love football. And the school I teach at is predominantly Pacifica students, but in the last year I've seen 4 Samoan kids represent their national team at junior levels. But then it kind of stops because for a long time there's not being there's not a voice for them, or there's not a voice to say, yeah, it's fantastic. You should enjoy football. So as Pacifica Islander kids are meant to play rugby league, so you kind of stop at a certain point. But there's this potential and this untapped potential. The school I'm at is across the road from Football Queensland, so there's all this untapped potential. I've had a lot of run-ins with people when I've spoken up and said, yeah, I think we can do things a bit differently. So yeah, I'm interested with this path. I'm interested to see how it goes.
I am too. Fingers crossed for it. A couple of things just to actually add to what you just said as well is the UK or European coverage of football 2 hours is a thing that fascinates me. I believe that if you can get success in coverage of football in Australia, you are the best in the world. You're the best in class, because it shouldn't happen. And like with all modesty, in the places that I have, we have, I've had discussions with the Premier League. How do you engage with younger audiences? How do you engage on digital? Because we have to sweat everything we've got to make it work. We can't just turn up and go, hey, here's a Mo Salah goal. Hey, here's a picture of the grass at Old Trafford. Hey, here's the Bernabeu. It doesn't work like that. Or what a try, or what a shot, or what a goal. AFL parlance, like it's not as easy to make football content sing or relevant in Australia. So that is our ultimate challenge. But I know it can be done, but it's also very different to what happens overseas, because they can rely on the volume and the mass. It's a bit like, to use a cringy saying, it's like shooting fish in a barrel kind of thing. Like it's gonna work. The second part of it, it's late and I've forgotten what I was going to say, but I did have the other bit I was going to say was to all those other things you mentioned, partisan. But look, through my time, like my main motivation for doing this, as opposed to going and folding in and working for the mothership again somewhere, is that ultimately there's no baggage, there's no overhead, there's no legacy, there's no infrastructure that's holding you to the Stone Age. So digitally we're free, socially we're free, football-wise we're independent, thought leadership-wise we're entrepreneurial. So there's none of the baggage that's held what our coverage of the game back, when instances that I've been at ended it. Broadcast rights at Fox, telco issues at Optus, financial issues at the A-League. Like, this can just live and die. And I'm not saying this is good. We hope we've got great plans for this, but I also know it's going to be, there's a crazy adventure ahead. There's no guarantee of success here, no guarantee. But all I know is we'll give it a red hot crack, and we'll know all the answers if it works. We'll know all the answers if it doesn't work.
Alrighty. So I think probably, is there anything anyone's dying to say? Because I could wrap it up in a second.
I mean, I could talk with David for ages. I feel there's so much to talk about, and so much that you just mentioned that I just want to tap into and break. Yeah.
We'll start next time at 7:00. We'll go for a couple of hours.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, nothing else to say. Just thank you for your interest, and obviously the follow through. What you guys do is inspirational. I've said that to everyone that rolls up the sleeves and does it for the love of the game over the course of the journey. I've said that to everyone. And also the fact that you had skepticism, which is great, and then curiosity, and reached out to have a chat and find out a bit more. I thank you for that, and hopefully, our first challenge is to make sure that your community is interested and engaged with what we're doing and can feed back on it. And we're going to have thick skin and open mind to everything. We won't be perfect, but you just know we're giving it a red hot crack.
So thanks so much for those sentiments, and we will hopefully give you some honest feedback on the forum. And please, if you're at home, give some honest feedback about anything David said, and of course, Football360. And from our perspective, we're really hoping that we can see media work successfully and work in arm with grassroots in this country, because we do need football media in this country, and we do need it to represent all of football and not just certain niches. So thank you so much for joining us, David. Please join us at the forum, greenandgoldfc.com, if you have any comment. We're also on Twitter, Spotify, and Apple. That's all we have time for this week. Until next time, it's bye for now.